younger brothers know more, so you know me, so I'm not, and you know, I'll tell you better to know about me. So we are cutting down on the introduction also. We've heard a lot of things, so let's find out about this thing. So can you just present this? Please open your mobile phones, type menti.com and use this code 6784612. The sooner I get the answer, the easier it will be for me to continue further. Yes. So how am I going to miss out on these things? Today I'm going to menti.com. MENTICOM, menti.com, and use the code 6784612. That is also my credit card CV number, so you can use that. 6784612. 6784612.
Net condition is not so okay.
Net saturation is not conducive.
Mine is working, so somebody's will work. So I cannot think it is so bad that nobody's net is going to work. It's just a word cloud. So just write down, you know, whatever attributes. So you can give 3 answers till I don't know. Menti.com, Guru, 6784612. Because the net is slow, I assure you this is the only poll that we don't have, and I'll just take it forward from there. And there are many aspects of storytelling. Today I will talk about the neuroscience aspect of it. I mean, this is not, I'm not joking. I'll talk about, you know, why storytelling is important, how we can use that in the classroom. Wonderful. So this is one person. Okay. So we have a surveillance mechanism, we understand who is answering that, and we'll ensure that people who don't answer don't get a good lunch packet on the 24th. Wow. Stupidity. That's answer. Somebody said that stupidity in the storyline makes it sound very interesting. That's wonderful. Chair. What does that mean? Okay. Gender, box, I don't know, BM means off, telling, chill, classroom, brag, creativity, languages, thrilling, originality, relevance, currency, interesting, wonderful. Narrative structure. Interesting. So this is an interesting word cloud. In fact, I'll download this and share with you so that you know that word. So make sure everyone is answering that. Okay, so this is why. Right. So one more. So based on all this, so let's have this as well. The present colon, present. Just one more. I promise this is the last one for the day. Yeah, code is coming. So it's a different code. It's 85912943. 85912943. In fact, there will be a session on how can development stories be make more interesting than UPCs or an online thing. But let's get your views. Special development journalism means, you know, the development stories you write or the way you present it basically. So journalism is a big thing, so just 85912943. Okay. Grassroots reporting, live reporting, creativity, storytelling, concept, subject, selectivity, engaging real experience. So wonderful. So many of you said reality. Okay, so how actually you present reality is the question. So anyway, I mean, we know the importance of storytelling in many other dimensions. So as I said, let's see it from the science of the brain dimension. So it's a TED talk that I'm going to play out for a moment. And why is it that storytelling as a format is so effective? There are many ways of looking at it. So I just come to the science of it, the brain science of it. So just thank you very much for the first two answers. The first one on basically on storytelling, what are the things that are important, and we'll talk about that. Say for example, when we talk about climate change stories or those kind of stories.
Sorry, the registration sheet, anybody has seen it? To take me.
I'm not touching
I can just take
I'm
that.
touching the bag.
So sorry.
So this is a bigger video. I'll not play the entire thing, but just
different manner. Now and effective storytelling. And to understand how this device is working, we have to look into our brains. And we have to formulate the question in a slightly different manner. Now we have to ask how these neural patterns in my brain that are associated with my memories and ideas are transmitted into your brains. And we think that there are two factors that enable us to communicate. First, your brains now is physically coupled to the sound wave that I'm transmitting to your brains. And second, we developed a common neural protocol that enables us to communicate. So how do we know that? In my lab in Princeton, we bring people to the fMRI.
So basically, we don't have the time or the opportunity to go into deep into all this, but I'll share the link. I'll probably also share the video with you. So these are the parts of the brain. Because we have these, electronic magnetic imaging things available there, we know which part of the brain gets lighted up when we are talking in certain terms or when people are listening to certain kind of things and all. So when I have a particular thing that I'm speaking on, what are the parts of the brain, and there are all those different parts. They're all in the video. I'm not getting into all the technical details, but just to give you a background, this is what they did experimentally, and this is what was found out. So this is basically about human storytelling and how I can transmit my ideas, or how a journalist or any communicator can transmit his ideas more effectively when he just changes the format of presentation.
And we scan the brains while the other telling or listening to real-life stories. And to give you a sense of the stimulus we are using, let me play you now 20 seconds from a story that we used, told by a very talented storyteller, Zimo Grady.
So I'm banging out my story and I know it's good. And then I start to make it better. By adding an element of embellishment. Reporters call this making shit up. And they recommend against crossing that line. But I had just seen the line crossed between a high-powered dean and assault with a pastry. And I kind of liked it.
Okay, so now let's look into your brain and see what's happening when you listen to these kind of stories. And let's start simple. Let's start with one listener and one brain area, the auditory cortex that processes the sounds that come from the ear. And as you can see, in this particular brain area, the responses are going up and down as the story unfolding. And now we can take these responses and compare it to the responses in other listeners in the same brain area. And we can ask how similar are the responses across all listeners. So over here you can see 5 listeners. And we start to scan their brains before the story is starting, when they simply lie in the dark and waiting for the story to begin. And as you can see, the brain area is going up and down in each one of them, but the responses are very different and not in sync. However, immediately as the story is starting, something amazing is happening.
So I'm banging out my story and I know it's good. And then I start to make it.
Suddenly you can see that the responses in all of the subjects going look to the story, and now they are going up and down in a very similar way across all listeners. And in fact, this is exactly what's happening now in your brains when you listen to my sound speaking. And we call this effect neural entrainment. And to explain to you what is neural entrainment, let me first explain what is physical entrainment. So over here you can see 5 metronomes.
This is just for 2
Most of
minutes.
these
Just
5
please
metronomes
pay
is
attention
5
to it, that's
waves.
all.
And similar to the listeners, before the story starts, this metronome is going to click, but they're going to click out of phase. Now see what will happen when I'm going to connect them together by placing them on these 2 cylinders. Now these 2 cylinders start to rotate. And this rotation and vibration going to the wood and going to couple all the metronomes together. And now listening to the click. And this is what we call physical entrainment. And now let's go back to the brain and ask, so what's driving this neural entrainment? Is it simply the sounds that the speaker is producing, or maybe it's the words, or maybe it's the meaning that the speaker is trying to convey? So to test it, we did the following experiments. First, we took the story and played it backward. And that preserved many of the visual auditory features, but removed the meaning, and it sounds something like it. And you can see that these words start to induce alignment in early language areas, but not more than that. And the responses in all the language areas that process the incoming language become aligned or similar across all listeners. However, only when you use the full, engaging, coherent story, the responses spread deeper into the...
Can you see the part of the brain that is getting involved when they are using this storyline structure? This is real life evidence. So that's why I started off with this scientific evidence, technological determinism or whatever. But the point is, we have the tools to know, something that we've known for generations. We've had storytellers for generations. So we'll just discuss what is a story, what kind of a storyteller we can be, or what are the kinds and all, and how we can use that. Of course, there are provisos. Every story, every content cannot be put down in a storytelling format. Every class cannot be used in a storytelling format. But even then, we have these ideas, your personal life story or a student's life story or the life story of a person who develops certain things or whatever. Because in those stories, we'll find out all the complications that we want to put across. Because if we are just using a didactic way, I'm sorry I have to sit here because I would rather take control of this device here. So rather than speaking in a didactic way when we are trying to explain things, or when we try to put it in story format, we just have scientific neuroscience evidence for that. If you want more hardcore stuff on that, I have it with me and I will share it with you on the group. It's from the PMAS journal where they have actually been doing these magnetic resonance imaging and trying to find out which part of the brain lights up. So when we have to actually put our thoughts into the receivers, the best way is to use this storytelling format. So this evidence is okay, right? What does the jury say? The evidence is, you need more evidence. Yes or no? Please, can I hear that? Okay. Evidence is okay, right? Yeah. So the jury does not require any evidence on that. So this case is dismissed, right? Or resolved. Wonderful. So let's come back. I have quite a few things to say, and as I said, we could have carried on for very long, but we know that we can just do with So let me just, in fact, rather than going to why storytelling works, just some of these structures. I mean, this is your area. We're just trying to kind of deconstruct that into a journalistic form, and especially for the digital format and all. I did a video on this, so it's all available. I'll share that. So basically, this is coming up with the abstract. We know about the inverted pyramid, so we are going beyond that. we're probably going to get into the diamond structure, or we're going to get into that hourglass structure. We start off with an individual, the individual's story. So again, a lot of you said empathy is the thing that attracts us most in the story. So what do we mean by empathy? What is empathy? Many of you wrote down empathy. That was the biggest thing on the cloud there. So what actually is empathy? We can identify with the protagonist on the screen. Right, that identification is in many senses very natural. Let's come back to the neuroscience of that attachment. When I identify with the protagonist, or when I identify with the issue, there are mirror neurons in my body. Mirror neurons. I'm sure everybody knows what are neurons, right? Yes or no, please? Did you have tea? Yes or no?
Yes.
Louder, please. Yes or no?
Yes.
Arey Baba, जोर से बोलो. Yes.
Yes.
Sleeping everybody. So we know what are neurons. Mirror neurons. When the protagonist is there, he feels pain. I feel a part of that pain. When after 1021 days, King Kohli raises his bat high up in the air, I feel exuberant. I can identify with that character. This is real. This identification is not just based on superficial factors. It is based on science. It's based on chemistry. It's based on biochemistry. So the identification should be of that level with which people can identify with. There are many types of stories. There are 7. Achyut sir is there. He knows about narrative structures more. Better than anyone else. We will attempt, all those 7 structures, and I will very quickly kind of go. We just have 10 minutes, so we don't have time for that. But I will share these PPTs. Plus, it's there on the net as well. I have had these things. So, at its simplest, a story is a protagonist in some kind of a problem. There are many structures. This is just one kind of a structure, and how he or she tries to address that problem. Number one, protagonist must be something that you identify with. If you do not identify with this the protagonist, or if you have something which is known as oppositional decoding, whatever you say that, we are not going to take it. You are trying to show the white man is the savior, I don't take it. So you try and whatever, hegemonize your narrative, I'm not going to take it. So that identification has to be very real. And that is where this idea of this user experience, that is where this idea has to become very important. That pain should matter to me. His victory should matter to me. The whatever terms that we are talking about, whether it's climate change, whether it's vaccine resistance or whatever we are talking about, that should matter to me. It should create that kind of a mirror neuron response in me. If it does not do that, then that storytelling will not work. It might have the opposite effect. Because that is very real. This identification with the character. Plus, we badly want him to win. Every time King Kohli went out to bat, we badly wanted him to score a century. And when he used to nick that, it was almost as if we were nicking that. You have to identify with this struggle as well. Unless you are rooting for the protagonist, the storytelling is not going to work. And as I said, this is like a very, very simple way of putting it. So, number one, we put it in this particular format. Number two, we have to ensure that people identify with the protagonist. Number three, the problem is something that the person should be, and we're doing it all the time in our journalistic writing when we're using those nut graphs, that structure that we start off with. Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown. Every day, thousands of children have been walking up the hill to fetch water because it's not available and this and that. We've been doing that, these nut graphs. We start with that anecdote and we come to that nut graph. And that graph should make sense so that people continue reading. Why exactly will bend down? I mean, that should be interesting for me, relevant for me. If it's not relevant for me, I'm not going to read any further. So that's where a particular usage of this nut graph, that's why I spoke of that hourglass figure. We start off with an individual, then we come to the larger picture, and then we talk things about that, because otherwise things can be very boring. Statistics is very boring. Data is very boring. Statutory morning, tomorrow we will talk about data, but we'll ensure it's not boring. 8 to 9 p.m. all morning. So this is one aspect of it. I'll very quickly talk about some of these things from literature. I mean, this is, as I said, so we start off with the abstract. It's different from the inverted pyramid structure. We start with the abstract. What is this about? Then the orientation, then the complication, then the evaluation, then the result, and then returning to the present. That's what they do in television stories very often. So this is what it was, and this is where it's like, I wish I could elaborate more on this. But we'll have opportunities. Maybe we'll have a 3-day workshop on storytelling, maybe at this university sometime. So then we'll have more things to talk about there. So this is one of those things. What is it? What pyramid?
So Aristotle's how play.
So is it the free-time model?
Yes. सही जवाब.
5 axis.
आप जीत चुके हैं 5,000 रुपए. Wonderful. So that's the failed experiment. And a lot of this can be, onto that. There are videos, I'll share all those things. So you have the exposition. In fact, one of those videos I used Shawshank Redemption to tell you, this is how they were setting up these things. Yes, showing us how that inciting incident, then rising action, then the climax, then the falling action, then the resolution. So I used Shawshank Redemption to tell you that this is one of the ways in which we share story. That's how. Is there anyone who hasn't watched Shawshank Redemption here? Everyone has, right? You haven't?
I have seen.
Oh, you haven't seen. So you haven't. You are from the next generation. Everybody from our generation, everyone has watched Shawshank Redemption. Why they listen? So give me that money. So it can be about character, it can be about setting, it can be about movement. So we talk about that. This is 7 basic plots. I'm not going to get into those plots, but very quickly just to tell you. And you know where to get those PDFs from. Oh, this is getting recorded, so cut. So these are the 7 basic things that they talk about. I'm not going to get into that. Just to tell you an idea about what are the story ideas or where do we talk about these things. Voice and return. So comedy means something in this particular sense, in this Christopher Booker sense. It's not in the how would I put it? In the crude Kapil Sharma way. So it's like different from what? Tragedy is also, and of course there's rebirth. One exercise we actually do is, so there are other things also, as I said, time is limited, plus we are in a very, just 4 minutes. Just let me.
So fighting inner demons could be another.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, in fact, if you see that, so I'm not trying to pitch in my YouTube, I don't get any money out of that, but if you want, you can have a look at that one.
This thing is there. Professor Newspeak is there.
So this is again from one of those wonderful books on storytelling, and because very often, and I've been asked these questions, and I've had these FDPs at various places. So many people are kind of saying that storytelling थोड़ा exuberant होता है, मैं तो थोड़ा ऐसा I have to. So I'm just trying to give you these 2 ideas. So we can be a storyteller of either of these 2 types. So next 5 things are just. Many people are theatrical, their expressions are like very, very over the top at times. And that's important, some people when they speak. And others are just conversational, they will be just talking in a conversation tone, but still the story makes an impact because we know that identification and all those things are there. So it's for us to understand, it's not to suggest that, every time we are theatrical, but at times, it might require a theatrical performance, and other times it can be just a conversational performance. But these are, just two extremes. So just to identify, it depends on the person, it depends on the situation, it depends on the class. It depends on the time of the class. Again, as teachers, often the first person helps. But generally, in journalism, what happens is that the person who is a journalist, and if he starts speaking, he's so full of himself, he thinks that he is the ideal and everybody should be listen. So that I, and Dale Carnegie hates I. Right? The more we keep on talking about I mean, we are putting off people. That's what Dale Carnegie said ages ago. Haven't we read that, all of you? Haven't we? Why have we all become spiritual suddenly?
That's a quotation by Dale Carnegie long back. Less of I and that's there.
Anyway, you're not spiritual, you're laughing, so thank you. In that sense, right? So whether we speak in the third person, Don ko pahna mushkil nahi hai. You're talking about the thing of third person, not the royal we. Hum jahan khade hote hain. Storytelling start hote hain. So it depends in many cases. In many cases, the third person works. In other cases, especially when we are in classroom structure, let people say, let students talk about anything, their stories. So how did you come to this, or how did you, whatever. So that's where, the most important thing apart from any other thing is to get in the complexities. Otherwise, when we are explaining things, we run the risk of making it simplistic. I'm not saying simple. Simplistic is, we are kind of reducing the complexities, and probably that's not right very often. And when you have these real life experiences, it's easy to bring in the complexities. It's very easy to bring in the complications. It's very easy to bring in the questions. So that's where the third person and the first person is important. We've heard many speakers, and I'm not going to take names. Every time you hear them, it's the same intonation, the same joke, the same pause, the same examples. It works with some people. With others, most of us, with communication teachers, we have to improvise. Because, we have to at times snatch away 10 minutes from science class so that, introduction start with mera kya hoga hai? You should prepare karke rahe. So that improvisation is a part of what we teach very often. So again, it depends. Many people are very good at memorizing. Let them do that. It works for them. So it's not that that. So I'm not even saying that these are two extremes. This is a continuum. And in fact, we actually do an exercise where I ask you to place yourself wherever you do it. Maybe at this point of time. So that again is I'll just take 2 more minutes to just finish off, and we'll have these conversations over and over again. Your vocal life, whether it is understated or whether you are animated all the time, you are just making sure that your students don't fall asleep, or the audience is not looking at their watches or their mobile phones all the time. So at times you have to do this. So this is again, the vocal thing is also depends on a lot of things. So you might need to go and follow the intonation at times, and at times you don't need to go there. Because in storytelling, we are also transporting the person. That again is very, very important. That transportation thing, you're transported into another world, into another, and that actually happens really in reality. So that's where you have to make it believable, because that again is very important. So whether that story is believable or not. Many a times, I'm not going to take names of our political leaders. Their stories are so far-fetched have some, ठीक है आप बहुत बुद्धिमान हैं, हम भी तो थोड़ा सा समझते हैं. Don't. So that is very important. That whether you create that, realistic thing, whatever. Of course, there is magic realism, but that is, again, something which is not in my domain, that is in Sir's domain. But again, that's important, because otherwise that identification will not be there. As I said, if that identification is not there, that mirror neurons will not be there. Very often, I was listening to one of those wonderful speakers who said that when we write on the blackboard, whenever I'm writing something, the mirror neurons in the students, they are actually going through what you're writing. So that's when PowerPoint is not always a very good thing. That's why, we have to engage them in that. And PowerPoint is a very big distraction. You're looking at the screen. You're not looking at me. If you're not looking at me, I've lost you.
Even rather not giving attention to the speech.
Yes.
Probably
because
should
you
be
can read and
concentrated
understand.
what is written there.
Yes.
That is always chalk and duster is a much better option
Absolutely.
than click
Because
and photo.
your mirror neurons, I'm saying that oftentimes you might do that, but you are actually working on that.
Yes.
That's why this is important to keep you involved, keep that identification, keep that situation realistic, keep that problem that the person is going to surmount. I'm not saying that the problem solution thing is the only thing. There are many other ways of dealing with the story. So this is important to create that kind of a situation where people don't say, "Bahut fekhta hai." And once you get that, "Bahut fekhta" kind of thing, next time you're not going to listen to the story because And then again, there are lots and lots of things about about the brain itself. I can go on and on. There is something known as amygdala here. That is the management people do a lot of those kind of things. That is something which prepares you for danger. So whenever there is something which is like boring coming up, your brain shuts off. Not boring actually. So this is about danger. So I'm equating that. So there are lots of parts of the brain that we have to realize that where it works better. So because it's evidence-based, we have to understand that storytelling is important. In fact, we'll do this exercise more often for journalism teachers at different platforms. How we can make our classes very interesting, because that's the challenge that we have to face. Those poor students sitting and listening to all those highfalutin theories from media, ecology to dependency to, and we're putting them away, Even big colleges this time, they haven't had as many education that they used to. So probably this is a place for us as teachers also to stand up and realize that how do we make it more relevant? Because that user experience thing is very important. It's real. Journalists are realizing that. If I know, because of the digital media, I actually know which part of the video they like, which part they did not know, which part they just went off, which part they do. And it's so rich. One reason why Hindustan Times Kolkata was closed down was because there was no web traffic from Kolkata to the Hindustan Times website. This is very real. And that's again a challenge, these metrics that they are faced off with. And those metrics are real-time metrics. If you put out a story, there are not enough takers for that, बहुत बेकार story. Latching onto the hashtag, latching onto what is carrying on, so that you get noticed. So the idea of news values have changed. In fact, I'm sorry, I keep on coming back to that because I keep on coming back to that because I keep creating things which I think are new and which were different. So news values reconsidered. I did another thing on that. That news values these days are not just those galloping on wages things and all those kind of things. It's because technology and society has many other dimensions. And one of the dimensions is the actor network theory. So if you are not conversing with actor network theory, you know which YouTube channel to go to. Okay. But just to tell you that, people are looking at it at different levels. So. And I promise this is the last slide before you start accusing me of violating human rights. And again, depends on people, it depends on the personality, it depends on the situations. There are many speakers, they stand in one pose and that remains. It does not change. They are comfortable with that. If you are comfortable with that, let it be. If you are comfortable with activity, just do that, start strolling or walking. People like me, we are very fidgety, we can't stay stationary even if you want us to. If you make us put on a panel, we'll try and get out as often as possible. So it depends on the person. So the storytelling thing is also, as I said, it's wide ranging. But the idea is to create those mirror neurons in your readers. The idea is to make people identify with those things so that they root for those things. And that's what journalism is all about. I mean, if it is not effective, it is not impactful, our departments will close down. I have completed 20 years of service. Hopefully, I'll get some pension for that. But if all our departments close down, we'll all be. Anyway, that was a joke, so not to be taken seriously. Thank you very much for your patience. It was lovely having all of you here, and we'll continue with that. Although this is not the platform to announce that, but we are planning international conference on development journalism in North Bengal in the last week of November, and all for papers will be out. We'll try and ensure there is no registration fee, and we'll also try and ensure hospitality. We can't provide travel, but we'll try and provide free hospitality. Remember, this is, I'm not supposed to make an official announcement, so this is a embargo. You know, we used to have that embargo.
It's an embargo.
बता दिया लेकिन छापना नहीं, right? So I'm sure I've answered all your questions, and you don't have any questions, and you have to catch the bus also.
So I have this.
Yeah, please. This is just
So it didn't take much time to be fascinated with your session because I was already working with storytelling for a very long time. So my concern is, for me, Ellis and Boschno were my inspirers to get into academic storytelling, and I had fortunate professor who allowed me to write my thesis in a storytelling format. In fact, I used storytelling as one of my data collection methods. I don't use the word data because as a qualitative researcher, I don't believe in using data.
We use that in the wider sense.
On my side, yeah. So what I wanted to ask is, if keeping the point of empathy in front, I think academic writing needs more storytelling. So my question to you is, if there is a researcher who is doing his or her PhD or dissertation under you, and she comes up with a storytelling format in her PhD research, would you allow it?
Why not? I mean, I will first of all go and talk to the PhD department. What are the boundaries? Tell me. And then I will try and find out how to fit in those boundaries.
And most of us are still hanging on to a third-person perspective in research.
Of course.
How would you work that out?
I mean, as I said, again, it takes a long time to understand. I mean, or to relate to that. But as long as I know of the Jamia people, they also said that why should it always be academic? Why can't it be like practice based or those kind of things? So there have been people who are trying to suggest that a dissertation need not only be in a particular format. But again, those radical changes probably are already coming up. So in ways that we might not be sure of just now. So I'm sure we might have those kind of things, but that would be, I mean, I'll be ecstatic if somebody came up with a creative idea. So I would love to work on that, sir.
Just waiting for others. I
have
have
a lot
other
of
things to say.
স্যার বলছি স্টোরিটেলিং প্রসেসের মধ্যে একদম ওরাল হিস্ট্রি যেটা ম্যাডাম বলছিলেন, ম্যাডামের সত্যি হচ্ছে যে পিএইচডির ক্ষেত্রে যদি প্রসেসের ক্ষেত্রে মানে রিসার্চে যে কোনো তাহলে
Can I request you to put that in English? Can I have it in English again?
Okay, so the storytelling process and depending on the oral history in case of gender issue, when we are doing any kind of research work on gender issue, we have to depend a lot on the oral history method. And the storytelling is closely related with the oral history. And
so what I meant by storytelling was not just my story. I mean, in one of those slides, we actually talked about it. It can be the story of the person, or the proponent of the story. It can be, just a particular slice of life thing or whatever. So there are many varieties of it. And of course, that is what is important, rather than voice of God speaking over. You know what I'm talking about. When we're talking in terms of documentary and all, and we have these real voices telling their own stories. That's much more impactful.
Sir,
In fact,
I don't say that of ma'am's question. Ma'am, I recently attended this International Association for Narrative Inquiries Symposium, where a woman had, in the mass communication field, she's doing her PhD and she should be 42. She's just recorded her own oral history of being a non-reproductive woman, and she has put in her own personal narrative on her adaptation story, and it's validated as her PhD research. So, as we talk here, I think the abroad universities are taking gender and oral history and storytelling into academic in a different
It's an
level.
authentic source of information for gender research.
Yes, so when it is autoethnography, it is very authenticated, very validated in that case. Autoethnography is.
Autoethnography got into a bad name because of certain things I can't even discuss it here.
But I don't want to have judgmental connotations to it, just autoethnography.
No, of course, autoethnography is a good thing. And because there are, these are responses to technological imperatives also. And this is what, we will also keep on facing. I can say down 6 or 7 artificial intelligence sites, which I just need to provide words and will create essays for me based on whether I want to be persuasive or academic or whatever 5,000 word essays, which won't be caught by any Turnitin or whatever you have. So because those formulaic writings can be put into a template and can come out of this technological device, we are going to have more and more of these interpretative and these kind of things. So this is maybe a response in times to come. Because otherwise these formulas, we have to face these challenges. These, when we give these dissertations, and our students are much smarter, just 2 years. So, I hope I'm not giving you all the bad ideas, right? Or we are not giving out trade secrets, right?
Mr. Pandey, may I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
The thing is that in developmental story, what you have shown, the brain response like that, and if I work in a vernacular daily, which is not the largest circulated daily or else, and in the national daily, how many differences are there in the storytelling format? And which would be the proper?
It is just starting off with an individual story. We started off with Jack and Jill's story, and then we came out to we do that all the time. We do it most of the times. Rather than talking in terms of abstract, we start off with an individual's problem, and we create that individual whose problems people can identify with, or whose things are more realistic, and we know that it's not just there to make things better. And that's where this identification starts. But we should know that where the nut graph comes in, that's more important. If we just leave it at that story, and we do not talk about the background, we do not talk about the significance, and we do not talk about the context, then that story does not make sense. So that's where data comes in. That's where all the interpretation comes in. So we start off with a human example, an anecdote, maybe. So that's where the story will be more impactful. But of course, every story can't. Every news story can't be like told in form of story. Otherwise, it would be very repetitive. That you have stories and stories everywhere. Certain kinds of stories, more in terms of development, more in terms of these kind of things, more in terms of certain kinds of classes that we take. So I'm talking in both terms, storytelling as a pedagogical tool and storytelling as a tool for development journalism. Yes, Sean.
No, actually I was trying to figure out this thing, just clarifying it. For instance, dramatic quality, if it is conversational, it has a similarity with this, memorized approach.
Yeah.
That
There
linearity
are
can
many
be drawn.
overlaps. I was just trying to suggest.
That linearity can be drawn, means somebody who is understated precisely would see it.
Yes.
Means that, and the vice versa.
Yes.
Just like that.
So we are just trying to these are not my points. I am forgetting about this wonderful book on storytelling. Must be in one of those libraries. I'm just forgetting. But I'll share what.
মানে মনে
So it is from.
মনে করতে হয় বলেই সোজা হয়ে বসে থাকবে।
এটা আমি sorry, I won't go to.
ভুলে যাবে না, নড়াচড়া।
Shall I speak in Tamil? Just 2 or 3 lines. So yeah, this is there. So the point is that there are these certain differences. We will have to talk about it. So this is one of them is about the vocal quality. The other is about how you portray it. The third is how you present it. So there are a lot of ways of it, or how you build up the narrative structure and so on and so. So narrative engagement theory is not new. In fact, narrative engagement theory, why it works and so on and so forth. There are reasons for that. The idea is to start implementing all that, and we know that we've been doing that. And that's what things started off with. That's how a lot of these norms of society and everything. That's how it came up. And always the stories have to have a good moral ending. You never have the villain winning this girl or getting away with everything. So it's always it always has moral undertones. It's always there are certain dimensions to those kind of stories. So basically, and that's where again तुम्हारे लिए एक हफ्ता नहीं मुझे बैठना है, आप जाओ, मुझे जब मर्जी हो मैं देखूंगा वो ग्लास क्यों हुआ, right? So there are these chemical responses there, and we actually work on that. So why do we keep on watching that? अरे यार इस villain को कब सजा मिलेगी? And you're waiting for that, and that's where the engagement comes in.
Adhura search.
Yes, unless that engagement is there, the storytelling doesn't work. So every kind of storytelling will not work. And what are the dimensions of engagement? We spoke of some of those dimensions. I've overshot my time by 18 minutes, and I'm sure the authorities at Xavier University Kolkata will excuse me for this. Because the bus driver will not be a babus without the bus driver.
So I have a few observations, but I don't know.
Yeah, please, sir. Yeah, we're all, I mean, of course. Yeah.
No, I was sitting here and I will tell you a story. So when Krishna was giving the Gita sermon, I think more than Arjuna, it was the horses who were listening to it. You all mass-com people were talking to each other, jealous. I was sitting like a horse here and listening to this, overhearing some of the words. Because I really felt completely out of place conceptually. The terms that we use in literary studies are used by you people too, but with a completely different connotation. So when you use the word story, there is some kind of agreement that the story is to be true, right? But we distinguish between fiction and truth. And when we tell a story, we know that we are telling something. And Naboku has a very famous theory about the origin of stories. He said when a boy first time came cried, calling wolf, 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 and there was a wolf chasing him actually, that was not a story. It is only when there was no wolf and he started calling wolf, wolf. It's incidental that he was eventually killed by a wolf and nobody believed him. So when people in journalism write a story, I believe there is a purpose. You want your stories to be believed. You want, whether it's true or not is that's another question. But the purpose of the story is that you like the reader, the newspaper reader for example, to trust that whatever is written here is true.
I'll just take one point, just 1 second, sir, to just put. So there is this epistemological divergence that we have.
Yes.
At one point, we are, just our job is very simple, just to report the news of the day quickly. The second is the assumption that we have the tools to find out what is the truth, and not just to find out what is true and what is factual, but also to make people believe that whatever we are saying is true. So that is where the divergence is. Sorry for
So that's what I was trying to say. So here is this question, because this entire faculty development program is about development of journalism, and this is trying to connect the three questions here that have come up. One was about the vernacular media. We know, we all watch films, we know that now we don't make enough number of films on villages. Right? So Panchayat is one OTT text which has become very popular now, but otherwise mostly we don't watch films, we don't read stories, we don't even read news stories about people with whom we do not have what you call mirror neurons resonance. Right? Because we have not been to villages, we haven't suffered exactly like that. So the question of empathy requires a certain kind of experience, a certain kind of familiarity, a certain kind of epistemological grounding in which will make us produce those mirror neurons. I will not be able to, for example, when Sitara and a man was talking about women's experience, men will not ever be able to experience the pain of a rape victim. Right? Or our students here sitting here, they did a wonderful documentary on menstrual health in Kolkata and how it happens in women's schools and girls' schools. So the men in the audience or the boys in the leadership will not be able to experience that. So that mirror neuron thing will immediately not happen. What might happen is that we will identify with some woman who is very close to us, and through that we can do that. It's a kind of a transferred empathy, not a direct empathy. So the question about development.
So I'll just answer this point and then we come to that. So this is where we talk about intersubjectivity. that as human beings, we have this power to, not the same extent, but to a certain extent, put myself in Tanmay's shoes and see what he would be going through when he had this accident, or to someone, imagine myself in that kind of thing. So that is why, we can help this, this shared meaning even from distal experiences and from others' experiences. So that is one of the assumptions, we make, that of course there are, imperfections, but this is one area where we think that this empathy, is possible because of the human condition of intersubjectivity, where we actually, I could preempt your question, if I just...
No, I know, intersubjectivity is probably, to just add to that, this is a term that Husserl and the entire phenomenological school brings up this idea of intersubjectivity, and that does not work. That's what I was trying to tell. When we talk about literary criticism, when we talk about deconstruction, we do talk about expanding our circle of empathy, we do talk about trying to identify with other people, and that's why the story, I just end with the story with probably no question, but as a provocation. So there are a few things that we have in Indian tradition. For example, the rasa theory. The rasa, as we know, when we produce, a text produces the same emotion in you, but the text is written with a purpose. We have in India, we have this long tradition of the Shringar ras, or the Rodra ras, or the Bhimhasra ras, and so on, is meant to create a kind of storytelling model in which a particular emotion, even if you cannot be in that situation, that is why we still get moved by stories of Shakuntala, who lived or did not live is not even sure, right? Some 2,000 years ago in a completely different context. So the idea of empathy is probably a bit of, I think, a political problem. It's becoming a political problem, especially when media is controlled by people, or the capital that is invested in media is drawing our attention away from certain contexts where development is really needed. We're talking about development, and in the morning the chief guest talked about development in terms of social indexes or indices of literacy, about female mortality, child mortality, and so on and so forth. So those are things. Drinking water, for example. I mean, you can't imagine. In my hometown back, I sent my father and mother back. They had 52 hours of load shedding. Right. Now, this is something which I have forgotten to even experience. So that is something which I feel is the real challenge. For development journalism, the real challenge is to be able to expand or intensify this level of intersubjectivity by using tools of storytelling in ways in which those same effects could be generated in our heads, even if we are not exactly in a position to do that. And to add to that that thing is, sorry if I'm taking
this is very important.
is the question of experience, because I mean this is a question which is very close to my heart, and I ask this often. And the question is very simple: can a man be a feminist? It's a question that I ask, because can a man experience things that women experience? And then they say, even if you can't experience, you can talk about it. Even you can't experience it, you can do a politics around it, which is a constructive politics, which is a creative politics. You can talk, you can do stories, just as I was talking about. So people who live in the city can write even in English media, English newspapers about villages in faraway places from the metropolitan centers in a particular manner. This particular model of storytelling, I don't know where exactly, maybe because we're giving a larger picture, somewhere we need to emphasize on those aspects which can create this kind of readership. Otherwise, development journalism would not really.
So the idea is to, more of a counterfactual argument. We have a, straightforward inverted pyramid, facts-based, way of putting out the news story. When we use the term story, we're basically talking in terms of news stories and these things. And then we have this option of putting out in a storytelling format, where we have actually these live examples, and then we build on those things and come on to the larger. So for us, the storytelling or the story is just a tool. It's not just about, and especially even for health communication or for those kind of things. And people are doing that. When you go to those cinema hall and they're talking about those cigarette things, actually have those live examples, people with those nauseating tumors, and you get that. So it's happening at that level. And plus, there are a lot of things about the human, brain that we still come to terms with. Certain cases, for example, confirmation bias. telling everybody that this is not true. Does everyone believe those fact checkers? Many people do not believe those fact checkers. Because they are addressing something which is known as a confirmation bias. So they are attuned to that, and that's where the brain shuts, and that's where all those things keep coming in. So the audience, from the audience perspective, and you're so very right about the dimensions of empathy, the dimensions of putting out in a story format and all. The idea in a FDP like this is to put out the possibilities and then work on these. In fact, one of the things that we'll do is we'll also share some good stories from the field about development issues and all, and it will be part of the pen drive that they get at the end of it. The idea is to just suggest in terms of what journalists are doing now and what can be done as the next step. So this is nothing new. I mean, people have been doing it all over the world. We are also doing it in India at various levels. So it's just to suggest that these are the reasons why we might think in terms of putting out story, in terms of personalized stories, oral histories, in terms of examples, in terms of individuals going through that 52 hours of float sharing and then coming on to the larger picture. As we say, we have that structure of nut graph where we come on to the things that this is what will happen. Somebody is talking thermal power, and those kind of things. So why should it be? So coming to those larger pictures, because that interpretation, that contextualization, that giving the back note to that, background to that, and the significance to that is something that journalists need to do, especially in this artificial intelligence background where templates will be doing most of our jobs.
But are journalists vulnerable to what is happening? Do journalists really have that power, given the kind of control that that media, films, OTTs have taken over this entire narrative process? And I'll just give one final example.
Yes, please.
This is because it's been in my head, and for the first time being able to talk to journalists here. I've always spoken to social activists. We had this case in 2012, all of us know, which is famous in India as the Nirbhaya rape case. And the entire country was involved in that case. Everybody was following what was happening to this girl. Every minute of her life, whether she's going to survive or not, she was sent to Singapore or somewhere for treatment. Everything was followed by people. Around the same time, so many other rapes were happening in the country. They were also getting space in the newspaper, but the readership was not following it. It was not gripping our attention in the same way as Nirbhaya quote-unquote case was getting. Now the reason is, to my mind, I don't know if I'm correct or wrong, the reason was this was a middle-class girl in a metropolitan city, 10 o'clock at night, with her boyfriend, out on the city, in a bus, in a moving bus.
And so precisely that was in Delhi.
That was in Delhi.
That is the
Absolutely.
Okay,
If it
had
had
been in some small town, area,
You never have got
it might
to
not
know.
get
Forget small town, even if it happened in Park Street,
Park Street,
it
yes.
did not
Delhi.
get the same attention as it got elsewhere. So there is something which is heavily favoring a particular kind of subject. And I was telling you this because there was a film that came just after that with Amir Khan and Kareena Kapoor, Talash. If you remember. There was a girl who was raped in a moving car and then thrown out.
That is not Talash.
Yes, that is Talash.
Talash?
Talash. Kareena Kapoor was the ghost who was raped in the car and thrown out.
No.
Yeah.
Amir Khan. Malappuram
That was the child who drowned and
Talash to. Jeta mone koro? Talash.
Could be, but the idea is that you see how Bollywood picks up on that particular image, and then the film will become popular, but it could have been. The idea is that these stories are subject to so many other political, economic forces that even if we try very hard, right, the challenge to get the stories heard. I mean, we may present the best story, as you were saying, but to wake up these people and say, "Hey, listen to this story," and which stories are important. Which stories are not so important, right? And that's something that I believe is where the challenge.
and the challenge is even greater
That's it.
because these metrics are very real.
Yeah.
Our bosses know that this hasn't got these many likes, these many clicks, these many hours of viewership or whatever. So this is not working. So it's the political economy of these news metrics which decide what is news, rather than other more important factors. And that's where probably we are even talking in terms of going beyond these traditional media news structures. structures, and making these things heard in other platforms, because of course it's no longer the sole gatekeeper, because when the sub-editor, the statesman used to decide that this is not the news for my Kolkata audience, the rest of the Kolkata audience would not know that this thing happened, because they had that power then, and of course elitism and so on, so forth was there. But those gatekeepers are being demolished these days. I mean, for some reason or the other, we have all these alternative platforms, and some of them are actually doing very good. Some of them, maybe on a political level, things like a lot of these YouTube, Bengali channels, and they have thousands and lakhs of views. So many things, which probably, again the political economy would prevent maybe Anando or those people from airing it. It actually comes out through alternative media. So the idea is that the communication, because it's an ontological challenge. Journalistic content is no longer just produced by journalists. A majority of the content is produced by non-journalists.
That's because of privatization and
Because of these technological affordances.
Yeah.
No, Professor Pandey, the thing is that I am associated with Doordarshan.
And I know that from 20 years.
Yes, more than 20 years like that.
I know that from 20
And
years.
yes, obviously the two thing is in my experience when I was in Khas Khabar, what was covered by private institutions, it was being telecasted in Doordarshan. Equally the same in Doordarshan, and what is the developmental journalism from the point of view that they shows, basically the Doordarshan shows prioritizingly the developmental stories. But you see the viewership of Doordarshan very less. But when in that same issue, when a private channel is doing some propaganda or something else says the false or any falsification, something else, people doesn't bother. But they are watching the private channels or like that. So what do you think that what the first you shows the slides, the brains and something else, why people are not interested in developmental stories apart from that stories that
So it's not a straightforward question, of just development stories. So that is the idea. You're talking of content, I'm talking of the form as well. It's not just the content,
The presentation.
it's the form of your content.
The presentation.
Right? So it's just that the stories itself, it used to be, there was a time when we had captive audiences.
Absolutely.
For God's sake, audience fragmentation is a reality, live with it. You can't keep on saying, yaar, jab Doordarshan tha, to sab baith ke dekhte the apne. But this is a reality.
Sir.
OTT is a reality because the audience is empowered. Just one single small technological change, that we do not require the broadcast cables to transmit content, we will transmit it through internet protocol. Just this change, nothing more. And then the availability of 4G so that I can see that television everywhere, anywhere, in whatever format. So these technological affordances have changed this content as well. Panchayat was brilliant. Nowhere it became cliche. Just waiting to see maybe they are trying to work out a romantic angle between Sachin ji and Rinku. It did not happen. Because it has evolved to that extent. The audience has also evolved to that extent that they understand cliches and they are just going to boot it off. If we go back to the cliched representation, we will have audiences just shutting down. We do not have a captive audience. An audience which is not constrained by the television schedule. It's no longer that schedule that constrains me. I am not, much of us. 1/3 of our population, 45 crore unique viewers of OTT content. And when I'm talking of OTT, I'm including YouTube as well. Out of 135 crore potential viewers, 45 crore unique viewers. Latest ComScore data. 1/3. So this ecosystem has changed. And that's why probably being heard, and as I use that term, user experience. And that's where this is important. I don't want to get into details of all those things, but most of the time we'll have a lot more evolved content, lot more different ways of presentation. The idea is about presentation as well, not just the content, of making that thing impactful. Probably it might not create a great change, but at least we are making an attempt of making the content more relevant, more useful, rather than putting it out in a formulaic term, because those formula will be dealt with by artificial intelligence much better than we do. The same news story inputs for 10 different audiences in 10 different formats. It is possible through existing artificial intelligence programs. The same thing, if it's a KKR CSK maths, something for CSK people, something for KKR people, something for so same thing with those inputs, because those it's putting up in the templates. So that is why these things will become, these individual things will become, and you're so very right, sir, and that's why this humanities perspective is so very important, and that's why we would invite you to our future storytelling, because these are very important questions, because we are talking in terms of these dimensions, but these are the constraints, and we should be aware of these things as well. So maybe we can plan out a edited book on storytelling.
If our idea of story matches.
Yeah. Or even if it diverges, so we can have.
Great story in Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. So they show a film to this solitary village. So this hero is crying, and the entire public is crying because they're seeing the film for the first time. The next time they show the same film, this hero is beating up other people, and then they start breaking the entire cinema. They say, how could he do this? The last time he was crying, and today he's beating up so many people. Because that's the whole idea, that Latin American people do not buy the Hollywood style of storytelling. Right, and you can't go and sell the same storytelling method to all cultures. When this anthropologist took Hamlet to a Japanese village, the Japanese people said, this is a silly story, this can't even happen, because, and we think of Shakespeare as the universal greatest writer. They say, this is not how it happens.
Of course, yes. I mean, epistemology of the global south, of course that is an important area, and these are dimensions we have to look at. We are actually not following Hollywood in many cases, right? Thank God, Golgappa for chocolate did not work. You know what I'm talking about. Just changing the format because the sensitivities are different, right? We cannot, as somebody said, we cannot have a person with low IQ in our army. Our army is structured differently. I did not watch it because Tom Hanks full stop. Uske aage kuch nahi. Not because I was following some cancel culture or whatever, but I don't think that anyone can, that should be remade certain things, but actually that's my point of view. So those perspectives will be very different. We just, when we see these literal translations on our things, don't we find it very boring, when we find those literal translations of some of these advertisement slogans in Bengali or whatever, it's so abhorrent because those sensibilities are missing. So these are very, very important questions, and we'll keep coming on to that. Apologies for violating your human